Welcome to another episode of the Intentional Intern podcast. I'm super excited to get into today's episode, but first I wanted to address something that I've been seeing and hearing a lot. So, this podcast is called the Intentional Intern podcast, not the International Intern podcast. But I see where people can mix it up if they read it too fast. And luckily for y'all, we actually have an international episode today with an international guest. I'm very excited to introduce Amanda Uwase. So Amanda is a third-year business and French student at the NEOMA Business School, and she majors in business administration and management. Beyond her academics, she also runs a business that's in line with what she studies, the Business Student Podcast. Her podcast surrounds bringing valuable business perspectives and resources to help students stand out from the crowd. During this episode, Amanda and I have an amazing exchange of international knowledge and experiences, because that's what it is for us. So from her academics and her upbringing, this conversation is so unique and insightful to me, and I hope you all learned as much as I did. Especially those who are American and have not learned a lot about the Irish and business scene. So, for those who want to connect with Amanda, her LinkedIn will be linked below, and for those who want to listen to the Business Student Podcast, I've also got that link too. With that, let's get into the episode. Hi Amanda, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. How are you?
Doing well, tired, but that's nothing new.
Nothing new. That's a day in the life of an intern.
Tell me about it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm super excited to get into our first international student and international intern. Super excited to have you on. And I would love if you could really start us off by introducing yourself.
Of course, with pleasure. So basically, my name is Amanda Uwase. I'm from Ireland, and I'm currently studying in France. I'm a business student. Going into my final year and looking to do project management when I finish up. But I also am a podcast host as well, so that's great. It's kind of a crossover with the Intentional Intern and the Business Student Podcast. And more about me: I dance, I do content creation, all that jazz, and I also I love people. So yeah, that's me.
I love that you love people. Me too.
For the win.
I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about your studies. I think that's something super interesting for us here in America, because we pretty much have a more formalized, if that makes sense, sense of university in terms of from an American standpoint. So I probably think some of the most grand differences in a university education here is that there's some people who are semester based, and then some people who are quarter based, which is a little bit shorter than semesters, and dates and times just don't match up in terms of what those two look like and how they differ. What is university like over there in Ireland? What has it been?
So, university in Ireland is, I think it's the most closest thing to the American, since we both have 4 years, I'm assuming. But I'd say the difference would be we have a range of things you could do. There's also a TikTok course in the country, which is crazy. But I'm coming from a university, because some people come from colleges, technical colleges, all that jazz. So for me specifically, I come from Dublin City University, which is in not the heart of Dublin, but let's just say North Dublin. And we have different courses, from business to nursing to teaching. We have 3 different campuses. One strictly for teaching, another one for the generals, and another one for the writers that want their alone time. It looks like Hogwarts. That's what people say the third campus looks like. But for my course in particular, I'm doing global business and French, which is actually a very special course. You wouldn't find this course in a lot of universities in Ireland, because instead of going away for 1 year, which is the norm for if you're doing a language and I'd say if you're doing a language and business, for example, instead I'm going for 2 years. So because I go away to France for 2 years, I end up with 2 degrees, an Irish degree and a French degree, because they're seen as that, I guess. So I guess killing 2 birds with 1 stone, 2 degrees in 4 years. I don't know, but it is very much a course that you really had to be smart for it, if that makes sense. You really had to have your head down to get into the course, because the points, I don't know how the SATs, is it the SATs in America? In Ireland, it's the leaving cert, basically what we do at the end of high school and secondary school for Ireland, and they were very much high points. But once you get in, you're kind of in for the long haul. And I've been doing this now for 4 years, because I actually had a year where I repeated. And in that year, one thing I've loved about my time in Ireland was just the societies, because while I was in Ireland, I was president of a public speaking society, and that's where I kind of found my love for podcasting, and started a podcast for the society, trained up people to edit and stuff, podcast managers, and really learned how to network, the importance of LinkedIn, the importance of having confidence in yourself to really get a job and get out there and stand out, and also just meeting amazing people and working with, like, I really had a great team that I obviously had to lead, but they also were graceful enough to listen to me and carry out their jobs. And if they had an issue, they come to me, and if I had an issue, I was happy to go to them and talk it out. So it really taught me democracy, because not only do I like business, I like politics in doses. Because I believe it's really hard to be in this day and age and not be an activist of some sort, because a lot is happening, and I'm always of the fact that science is compliance. If this was happening to you or in your country, how would you feel? So just voice that, so that you can say to future generations, while this was happening, I was trying to help, So I'm an activist in that sense, but my bread and butter is business and people at the core of it, because, yeah, we love people. So yeah, that's a bit about me and the, I guess, differences.
I wish I could go to Hogwarts.
you know?
I love that you have such a dynamic degree, but also such a dynamic university experience. And even in you talking about everything that you do and how you get to have 2 degrees, that's super cool. For us, I think the comparison that I could make that's probably closest to that is like dual degrees. So you can get like dual bachelor's degrees, or for some people, you can do like your bachelor's and your master's at the same time. But in terms of, everything's all American, but being able to have like an Irish degree and a French degree, I know that's probably going to serve as very like useful. And I love that you gave this background into your love for business and your love for politics in doses. That's such a real statement, by the way, of just being an activist in that way. I totally agree with you that I think that there is a form of activism in everybody, especially with everything that's going on within the climate. So it's very appreciated, even I see appreciated like internationally in that way, of that sense of activism and things like that. And so I want to learn a little bit more about your podcast and how you got into that. And I know that's a similar thing that we share. And so I want to learn more about, what's your podcast about? What do you do on it?
Funny you ask. It's very similar to what you do on your podcast. And I actually started this podcast. I'm actually not the one who set up it. I took over from a girl that was doing the same course as me, but she has since graduated, because the idea of the podcast is the idea she came up with and pitched to a company that's still sponsoring the podcast is she wants to equip business students with real life advice and experience from people who have gone through it, so that they don't have to, so that when they do go into the industry, the business world, they're not like, oh my God, where do we go now? Who do I go to? What's personal branding? What's networking? Like, what is any of this? Like, what do you mean I have to do exams after I finish my accounting and finance degree? How? So, I guess what she wanted to do was really equip students with knowledge, and that was needed, especially in the competitive climate that is the business world. And then she obviously was graduating and she was looking for someone. And I'd always followed her. Her name's Kina Jordan, by the way. I'd always followed her on LinkedIn. And I really admired how she was like always posting. Like, she's even working for Google at the moment. She's worked for really big companies. I'm like, oh, how? And also a podcast. So she had put it up as an ad, like looking for students. And I'm like, I really love podcasts. I love listening to them. I love creating them. At the time, I had started a podcast with my friend called The African Babes. And I was like, we had started the summer before I was going to France actually. And I was thinking, if I get this, I'll probably leave The African Babes because realistically, being in two different places, me starting in a new country and her staying back in Ireland, it would need reevaluation. So went through the interview process and got the job. And then we started in August. And I thought one thing I really wanted to bring to the Biz Student podcast was more diversity. Because I feel like it's a stale, pale, and white industry, especially in Europe. I feel when it comes to business CEOs, all that jazz, and I didn't want that to be I didn't want that to be the only voice I brought into my podcast. Of course, I do accept the fact that they're the most people with the most experience, more time, but there are people with the same experience that look like me or you, or who could be brown, who could be Chinese, like of different ethnic, ethnicities. We'll say that. So that's something I really wanted to do as well, bring structure. I was thinking like, let's do personal branding, let's do networking, let's do CV, stuff to really help not only business students, but people looking to get into the business industry. And since then, I've just been also with social media. I feel like because I come from a social media marketing background and I had done an internship that last year, I really brought that to the Instagram. So that's helped it grow, especially with TikTok as well. But really and truly, I just want it to be more digestible. All the info we get in school, because we're taught stuff that in theory won't work. It won't work 9 times out of 10. So really getting advice from the people who've done it and who have experience. That's what I'm really big on. Experience is what I'm trying to spread. Yeah, but that's podcast.
I am so happy to hear another student talk about wanting to create another avenue or another opportunity where we can genuinely learn skills or hear advice and knowledge that we would not be able to have anywhere else unless we basically had to scour the earth and the depths of canyons of information and knowledge that's out there to try and find something. So the first thing I want to say is period. Good on you. And that is something that I feel like is going to be so valuable, and I'm sure it's already proven valuable by so many other students who listen to the podcast. Your experience in growing the podcast and being in social media marketing, I'm sure that's attributed very well. And from one podcaster to another, I want to understand like what was like your learning curve, if anything. Do you feel like there was something when you got into podcasting that like, oh yeah, I have to learn this because this is a skill that you like needed to develop for podcasting, do you think? Or did everything in terms of podcasting just come really easy to you?
No, not easy. I repeat, not easy, but fun. And for me, starting off with podcasting, it just grew from a love. And then I was like, how do people do this? Like, because I could listen to people for 2 hours, but I know I could also listen to myself for 2 hours. So, how do we get this going? And how do I get an audience? And just, you just play around. Like, I started off recording podcasts from my phone, editing it from my phone on an application on my phone, and it just worked. And just having just taking time with yourself, because one thing I'm glad I had is before starting the podcast in my university, I actually had a YouTube channel, and on that I would always be editing videos and cutting stuff out and adding stuff in. So I guess I come from an editing background. So when it came to editing podcasts, I was kind of like, oh, there's no images, it's only voice. And I did get help from people within my university who had experience from podcasting. And then I was like, instead of doing it on the laptop, I'm just going to do it on my phone. And then when I moved to the African based podcast, I was like, actually, I can do it on my laptop. And it's just the thing about podcasting and editing is finding the right application to edit and record, because when I was recording for my uni, I used something on my phone and an editor on my phone, and I used my voice notes to record. When I was recording the African Babes, I was in the studio with people behind the screen doing everything for me. And then with this podcast, I opted for me editing on a software on my laptop and recording via Zoom, because all the platforms that I could find. Either you had to pay a monthly fee, and I'm like, I'm already paying for Canva. Like, there's only so much a girl can do. So really and truly, just I found out what worked for me and kept practicing and working on it. And don't be surprised if your first episode is going to be bad, because usually it's going to be bad. Like, but you learn, like, there's so much to go into it. Sounds, having a headphone, not having a headphone. Then honestly, I actually also did, for a couple of months for this podcast, I had an editor, and I would pay them like for each episode. But what I realized is editing isn't my issue, even though it takes up my time. It's more so the, not issue, but marketing. That's always something I feel like I love people's insight on. So just getting people's feedback on how I can improve and trying to do it myself. But yeah, that's me.
I can fully relate to that about the editing part for sure. Because for me, I think on the other side, my thing was editing. That was something that I feared so bad. Of just like, I don't want to edit. Editing seems hard. But getting over that and kind of working through that to see how important it is, especially on the side of software and what you use to record and edit, it's so critical to understand. Even if you're not going to be the person doing it, but just even knowing what goes into that is something that is so important. And I didn't realize it until, I got a few episodes in. So I'm glad you realized that before me, at least in the sense of, at least having someone else to edit for a little bit and understanding that wasn't your problem, but just wanting the insights and perspectives from others really was what you wanted from that. And I feel that. I feel that down to a different level. I don't think I ever really realized, how important it is, especially for the type of podcast that we're running, to have insights from others on especially like what it may look like before it comes out. It's, you get the advice and everything afterwards of when it comes out in a video, but from that audio perspective of the people behind the scenes and versus when it's you versus other people that can give advice and expertise from that standpoint. Yeah, I totally understand. And then talking about your first podcast episode will be bad. It's better than not doing it at all. It's like,
Literally, it's nail on the head.
so
Mm-hmm.
might as well do it. If podcasting is a passion that you have, do it. And I know there's another thing that we hold in common on top of podcasting, which is just being interns. Can you talk a little bit about what your intern experience has been like for you, and then how your intern experience, on top of podcasting, what does that look like for you? What challenges do you face, if any? How fun is it doing it together? I would love to learn your insight on that.
Okay, so during my internship, I was doing a digital marketing internship in an events company that was sponsored by a big insurance company in Ireland called BHI. And for this particular 6-month internship, it was based solely on a marathon, a women's marathon, one of the biggest actually in the world, if I'm correct. That's what they kept saying. We'll just keep it a book like that. But it's called the BHI Women's Mini Marathon, and I was brought on to, first of all, start the TikTok and also engagement with Instagram and all that. And I'm like, this is easy because I post on Instagram every day without fail. So it's so easy. And so it was starting off, it was a bit bumpy because I was introduced to new copywriting. That's a thing. When I say copywriting, I don't mean trademarks and patents. I mean writing text the way it would be appealing to the and your target audience. And I was like, what? And I do like writing, but I make a lot of typos. So when it came to it, I was really frustrated with myself because I lacked that attention to detail. And that's something I guess I gained over the 6 months, that attention to detail is so important. And really being quick and coming up with ideas. Like, the easiest part was being creative with TikTok. That just came naturally. But the hardest was doing the copywriting, also newsletters on MailChimp, and also blog writing. I guess that's something I had to kind of pull out of myself. It was there, but I had to really work on it. And just the website, updated that website, even though it had no coding within it. It was just like, I'm not artistically, oh, this looks cute. But we got through it. But one thing I did, doing that alongside the podcast, I think the podcast was an outlet, if that makes sense, at the time. I actually wasn't doing this podcast I was doing another podcast with my friend. So I guess it was interesting to see that even though I was doing the podcast, it was more so like a break. This is the thing I enjoy. And I guess that's when I realized, oh, I actually really do enjoy podcasting because I would do this for free because I literally was. And I was like, okay, love digital marketing, but I feel like after doing the podcast, I was like, this is something I can do. And I don't have to be taught this in a classroom to do, but I would like to do something that's more okay. I went to school to learn this, if that makes sense. So that's why now for my internship next year, hopefully, I'm looking to go into project management because having done events for the digital marketing and also events for societies and stuff like that, I'm very accustomed to it. I like structure and I like collaborating. Like collaboration is one of my biggest, like I love collaboration. I think it's the best thing ever. So yeah, we'll see where that leads if I don't end up in marketing again. But at the same time, if I do, it's okay. Yeah.
And I was just about to ask you, like, what do you think is going to be your end goal? What do you think are all the possibilities of things that you can go into, like, after you're finished with your degree?
I honestly feel like the sky's the limit. I don't believe in limiting myself ever. Even doing the podcast now, I'm coming across so many different people, so many different, from accounting and finance people to VC people, like just having conversations just like this, even speaking to you, intern, it's like you really could go into anything. And because I'm just, what is project management? Even AI, like what is AI, like even just having these questions, I'm like, I really don't want to limit myself because I feel like going into this degree, I knew I wanted to do marketing, and now about to finish this degree, I'm like, but marketing is too, it's too safe, if that makes sense. And I feel like if you're gonna say you're a business student, you might as well take risks because that's one thing as a business student, like you're pushed to kind of take risks, do bigger, don't play small, like play big. And like the fact is, I feel like the more advice I get, it's like every guest I have on is like a mentor in a certain way, if that makes sense. So it's really good to hear from other people's experience, but I wouldn't say I want to go into project management, I'm going to stay there. It's more like I want to go into management for 6 months to see if it works for me, if it like challenges me, because with me, I'm like, I could be in a job for 3 months and then I've mastered everything and then what? So just something that will always give me that challenge, that okay, can we do this, can we do that? So yeah, I feel like there's none of this I'm dead set on my career path. I'm just seeing life as it comes, but also learning, okay, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, I have strengths here and I have weaknesses here, because it's really important to know your strengths and weaknesses so that no one can tell you, okay, but you're bad at this. Like, well, I know, we're working on it. So yeah.
First, I'm very, very happy to hear that you believe also that the sky is the limit and that there is no point in limiting yourself to just one thing. I love that you're wanting to try out everything and not leave anything untouched just to see what you really want to do. And I think that's something that is not as common here. And I'll say that with some nuance added onto it, because I definitely think there is a lot of kind of a routine where we're changing as a market in America. Of before, I would say my generation and my time, it was, go to college, get a job, get a good job, save that good job, and that's basically your plan. But of course, with markets changing and everything being different, and of course, people making their own opportunities, that's so different now to where I could not imagine just putting myself in one bucket. And I love that you have that same outlook yourself. And especially from a professional standpoint, I think having more things makes you stronger and just seeing what works out for you, whether that is in project management or if that is in marketing or if that is something else that you see yourself down the line doing that you would have never imagined now. Professionally, I think it's great. And so, kind of moving away from that professional angle, what are some things that you like to do in your downtime or in your personal time that recharge you whenever you're looking to get back into that professional stuff? Like, is there anything in Ireland that you do that really helps you when you're just wanting to rest and be well?
So I dance. That's one of my biggest passions. There's an Afro dance community here in Ireland. I started this like 2 years ago, so I'm new to this, and I've always wanted to do dancing, hip hop in particular. But then I came across the Afro dance classes from Southside Moves, and I said, "Look, let me just join," and I joined, and I've been there since. And I actually recently was in Amsterdam at an Afro dance camp with my Irish squad, if you want to call it that, and it was nice because like that's where I battled for the first time. It was just crazy the growth that's happened in the past 2 years. But dancing is really what I do to recharge. And there's a like the dance community in Ireland, they're really accommodating, really friendly, really nice, and yeah, they're just here to learn, to grow, and to really indulge into the African culture because there's a lot of African culture obviously in the Afro dance scene. And yeah, and also I go to networking events because I love networking. That's something I do to kind of meet other students, other business professionals, and really just also get guests for the podcast as well. I've done that, and I've from that I've gotten like not one of the best, but one of the like social media presence wise in Ireland. They had a big social following, and I had them on, and it really did numbers for the Instagram and the podcast as well. So yeah, just really networking and get to know people who are like minded. Because I am really a people person. Like I think I could talk for days. I'm a yapper. So yeah, that's two things that I do to kind of wind down, relax, if you want to call it that. But yeah.
Yeah, period. I didn't know that there was such a big Afro community in
Mhm.
Ireland. This is one of my first times getting to learn a little bit more about the country itself. So I'm very
Mm.
appreciative of you educating me on like Black identity in Ireland. I never knew anything about that. I knew that there were Black Irish people,
That's
but
good because many people don't.
to what extent, I had no idea. And so it's
Mm.
just interesting from that perspective to kind of understand different markets internationally and like what their intersectional kind of diaspora looks like as a just a country in general, something that isn't American, something that is so rooted in us as Americans. Of just kind of thinking for the country, by the country. And for
Mm.
you and like your business degree, in thinking about that in terms of like international markets and things like that, what do you think have been some of your most interesting classes within your university and what you've learned? I know we recently just talked about that you came back from a podcasting class, which I wish I had within my studies, but I would love to know more about what are some interesting classes that you've had.
I'd say from actually semester one, one of the really interesting classes I had was actually coding because it was my first time doing coding. And funny enough, before I was going to decide what university I was going to go to and what I was going to study, I was heavily contemplating computer science because I'm like, I like this coding. This seems cool. I mean, imagine being a hacker, like all this, child stuff. Obviously, I ended up not going down that route, but I was happy to do the coding course because one, it really it really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed sitting there coding for like 10 hours. But it was nice because it was a group project. It wasn't just myself. So being able to just create something, we were doing like design. So it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those are the design languages that are used for coding. And it was nice to just be able to design something and bring it to life and be like, wow, I just created a website. So coding was really interesting. Also ethics. We did a module in ethics there last semester, and I really enjoyed it because it got me thinking about like corporate social responsibility, how businesses play a big role in that, and how this is a big word in the business industry. CSR, like everyone talks about it, one way or another, because we're becoming more of a green conscious society. We want to recycle. We want to keep our forests. We want to keep our planet, if that makes sense. So it's really interesting to see how the business world is reacting to that and being able to be a part of those conversations. But yeah, those two would be my most interesting modules today.
Yeah. And were those just in terms of Ireland, or were those also including like your classes that you took when you were in France too?
So those were one of them was in English, another one was in French. So we did coding in
Mhm.
French. Yeah, because when we came from Ireland to France, we had to do one module in French, in English, and the rest in French. So we would take French courses, we take management courses in French. So, in terms of what we did in Ireland, marketing, I'd say, have been my most interesting module. But in France, I feel like it's really been eye opening to see, wow, this is how people think. And when it comes to France, France is really one of the hearts of Europe. I wouldn't say the heart because that's Belgium, Brussels, but it's very much a European country. Ireland, I wouldn't say it's a European country. That's up for debate. But being Irish, when I came to France, I was like, okay, we're in Europe now, you know, because Ireland recently joined the European Union like 1970, so it's fairly recent. But yeah, just being in Europe, mainland Europe, it really opened my mind to like, wow, this is international waters. This is where you make the big bucks. This is where you make the money, if that makes sense. So it's really interesting to see that, and the course is really, yeah, I was very much clued in, like, wow, this is really cool, you know? But yeah.
Awesome. And from that experience, like of you being in France, what were like your biggest kind of aha moments? So, like the difference between Ireland and then the difference between France, like what were your eye openers?
First of all, they speak their language. We don't. No one in Ireland speaks Irish. We speak English, but we are taught Irish. Like when we were in kindergarten, we've been taught Irish, but we don't speak it. So it's a dead-ish language, up for debate. And another thing is, French people are very proud to be French, and they love their culture. They love their baguettes. They love their wine. They love their cheese. Very, when it comes to their stereotype, to a T, they all smoke. Not all of them, most of them. But in Ireland, we are nothing like our stereotype, if that makes sense. Other than we drink a lot. That's true. And another thing is, France is more developed than Ireland. The transport is amazing. Like getting to school would take me 15 minutes. And even here in Ireland, I live 20 minutes from my school. No, I live like a 10-minute drive from my school, but it would take 20 minutes on a bus, which isn't great. So just seeing the infrastructure and everything was way more developed. They had more supports in France for students in comparison to Ireland. And French people are completely different to Irish people. Like I don't think there's a comparison. They're open minded. They're not as prude. They're not like ew. They're very open, and they're. But one thing is they're close. They're hard to, when people say French people are rude, that's just the Parisians, okay? I feel like that's mostly the Parisians. Once you go outside of Paris, they tend to be nice and they don't speak English. They don't. But that comes with learning the language. So for me, that was fine. But for anyone who doesn't speak French, it's a very long day. But I really did kind of fall in love with France just for the fact that it's something new and it's something that I love, like the language. That's why I went over to perfect the language. But yeah, there's a lot of differences, but at the end of the day, home is home. Ireland will always be my home. Like one thing I missed was community because I think that's a bit rare in France. But in Ireland, I very much have community and I know everyone and everyone knows me. So it's very much like home, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Hmm. And did you ever find like a sense of community in France when you were doing your studies there at all? Did you find anybody that you felt you could relate to?
Yes. When I went over, my idea was I'm gonna stick with the French speakers. But the only thing is, in my course, we were all international. No one really was French. So at the start, it was a bit tricky. But then as time went on, I got to know more people on my course, and I made friends with them, and we had a community there. But with people who were very much like authentic themselves, not surface level. And then I also got to meet French people who I feel like I have kind of made a community there because I have friends from Paris, friends from the south of France, and they're French and they really are lovely. And it's nice because before going to France, I actually met a French boy from Nantes, and like I went to France back and forth. He'd come to Ireland back and forth, and we'd always like be like, okay, I'm going to Ireland this weekend, okay, I'm going to France this weekend. And so he really helped with my French, and the level of my French is really thanks to him. His name's Maxime, if he's listening. But he's currently in Australia, and I moved to France. And it was so cute because he collected me from the airport and helped me move into my apartment in France. And we wrote each other like letters to read when we were like missing each other, and it was just really cute. So it's nice to, like, when you find the right people in France, you really do find people who won't leave you, if that makes sense. Like, there's no getting rid of them. Like, once you're in their circle, you're in their circle. So I find that really nice. I'm excited to see him come back because obviously it's been a year now, so he's coming back to France in August. So yeah, I say I have found my community, but it is in no comparison to the community I have in Ireland.
Yeah. And what's that like in Ireland in terms of the community and even the culture? What's that like?
So community in Ireland is interesting. Um, I guess the culture is different depending on who you are. Like I am black and Irish, but my black heritage is from I'm originally from Rwanda. My parents were from Rwanda. I obviously was born in Ireland. So navigating the Rwandese community and the Irish community, that's a struggle if that makes sense. But since George Floyd and obviously the Black Lives Matter movement, things have really changed and shifted. I'm lucky to be a part of a community called the Purpose Movement, where we encourage young people to really go for their dreams and go for like their purpose, chase their purpose, if that makes sense. And I'm also a part of a Christian community because I come from a Christian background called Galway Move. And I also have my friends from university and my friends from my different societies and also from the dance community. So I have my dance community, my church community, my purpose driven people community, and just really my friends from university. And it's like I'm able to go to all these different people. And even if I were to mix them, because one time for my birthday, I got them to go to a purpose event, karaoke, dinner. And there were like people coming in and out, but it was all love. There was no one like, why is she here? Everyone was really cordial and really friendly with each other. So it's just the fact that I'm able to be in so many different communities and be able to just be myself and be accepted, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Hmm. Oh, that's so interesting. I think hearing it from that perspective almost of kind of the differences between like the European community and culture comparative from Ireland to France is super interesting. And I'm sure the ideals in the communities are completely different of like what's important and what's valued. And I know you said that Ireland is your home. So, of course, the community is going to be completely different than if you were to go anywhere else. What do you think are some of the strongest values that you have for yourself professionally and personally? What do you think are some of the things that you value the most in the way that you operate on a day to day?
Professionally, I would say organization. I'm very big on organization and also just respect. I think those have to go hand in hand for me because I am an organized person, but I also do respect everyone I come across and I expect the same on a professional level. And also just being able to see the potential of other people professionally. I love to connect with people who are also like-minded, if that makes sense, and building a network that reflects me and reflects where I'm heading, because I don't believe in this, if she doesn't have six figures I don't want to be friends with them. No, because I have to meet people where they are and they also have to meet me where I am. So I tend to just horizontal network, if that makes sense. Network people who are on my level so that we can grow together. And it's not that thing of like, I'm looking to you for help all the time. Like, I rather be able to be of help to the person I'm networking with or talking with instead of just gaining, because I don't like to just take, I like to give as well. So professionally, that's me. Personally, I'm very much a person of faith. I'd say God would be my foundation, and even just respect as well, because I feel like certain people lack respect and it's really annoying. But just respecting everyone I come across and expecting the same. Personally, I'm very, very open minded. Because, for example, my friend Maxime, he is gay and I love him. And I don't understand from a Christian point of view why that would be an issue, if that makes sense. Because for me, it's like that is none of my business. And I love the person who they are, if it makes sense. So really and truly, I'm very firm in love your neighbor as yourself, treat people as you like to be treated, and boundaries really. So yeah, that's a bit of me.
You seem very strong and directive in exactly what you value, what you believe in, and then also just having respect in your professional and your personal values. You double down on business. Here, I don't know if that's a phrase that you guys say in Ireland, but standing on business is something
Yeah.
here.
Hmm. You have that in Ireland. It's gas. It's
Hmm.
obviously from America, but everyone's like, yeah, stand up business. That's great.
I mean, I would love to steal. That's grand from y'all because I love that.
Okay, you can take it. Look, it's grand. Any circumstance, grand. It's grand. It's just, it's grand. Yeah.
Yes, and for those of y'all who obviously aren't privy to what we're talking about, we had a conversation earlier where we talked about what does that's grand mean, and it just means, it's good, it's cool. I would love that. Why don't we all say that? I think that should just be something
Honestly,
universally
it should be
global.
universal. Instead of top of the morning, it's grand because nobody says top of the morning. No one. Nobody.
You
But
just
yeah.
educated me.
No one. I think I'm watching American in the shows, and when they say top of the morning, I'm like, well, who says that? you know?
Now you looking around for like who genuinely says that.
But like, I don't see it. But I mean, we all have messed up, not messed up, but incorrect stereotypes. Like, we have, yeah, if we were to come and talk about American stereotypes, we'd be here all day, but we'll keep it, we'll keep it pushing.
Mhm. And I think the amount that I've learned about you today, and just even in the way that you carry yourself within your careers that you have, even as an intern, or whether that's you being internationally for business and things like that. I want to know from your perspective of all the skills and everything that you've taken, what do you think have been some of the most valuable things that you've learned when learning about international business and being able to have that market perspective with a business degree that is surrounding international waters? What do you think is something that you feel, oh my gosh, this is so cool? Why don't more people know about this in terms of international business from that perspective?
That experience trumps a piece of paper. Because with my degree, what I find so interesting is you get two internships, not just one. And just the fact that I've done 6 months of experience, I'm going to be doing another 6 months. I'm like, I know myself. I love working. I love getting experience. And that's the best way I learn. Even doing the podcast, like for me, I enjoy that because it's something I'm doing. It's not something like, okay, piece of paper, here's your results. You're great or you're not great. So really learning that your experience trumps everything, and even being able to live in the country that I'm learning the language of, that has helped my language so much. Like, if you would speak with me in French a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to hold a conversation. But now, let's have a debate. Like, let's really like hash it out. Like, my level of French has really gotten to a level where, okay, people would think, "Are you not French?" Like, no, I'm not. I'm not French. But it's just the fact that you really need to experience, and that will always trump a piece of paper, because some people would have a degree and a master's on top of you, but the fact that you've done experience in this sector, you're going to get this job. Or you've done some work, even if it's like small bits of freelance work, and you put it into your portfolio, you're going to get this job. Like, even with your CV, I've learned that it's the way it's presented. Like, you could apply for a marketing position and have never worked in marketing, but because you have a social media presence, because you've done this for like your different projects, those stand out as experience. So really understanding how important your experience is and how important your network is. And that's why I really push having experience in working, but also networking and getting to know who are you working alongside, and understanding that not only do you have value, but they have value. So that's why my basis is always respect everyone, because this could be your boss in 10 years and you don't want to get on the wrong side of them. But at the same time, you just want to be a decent human being. Like, I feel like everyone should be like respect, it shouldn't be hard. But yeah, that's kind of what I've learned.
Yeah. And I have a quick question,
Go on.
especially kind of thinking about you went to all of these, almost like you're going to all these different places, essentially to do networking events, to do business, to learn about business. If you were speaking to a student who isn't from Ireland or isn't from France, but they wanted to go to either of those countries to whether it's to live or do university or anything like that, what are some tips that you can give for anybody who's not from those places to help them adjust?
To adjust, I would say join societies if you're there in the studying capacity. If you're not and you're maybe au pairing, go to events, look up Eventbrite and look up events and go to them alone. Because um anytime I go to a networking event, whether alone or with people, when I'm alone, I'm more inclined to talk to everyone. But when I'm with people, I tend to stick with my friend and not really talk to people. So if you do want to be able to adjust, you need to put yourself out there. And if you're uncomfortable, you're doing it right, because you shouldn't be uncomfortable in these situations. Not in the sense of like safety, but in the sense of like your growth, because you cannot grow from a place of comfort, because that means you already know what you're doing. But once you're in a place where you're uncomfortable, that's when you're gonna learn, because it's not losing, it's learning. Like you don't lose, you learn. You don't lose any time, you gain experience, and you gain that advice, if that makes sense, and that lived experience. So I would highly advise anyone from whether it's the States or outside of Europe to come to Europe. One, to perfect their language if that's what they want to do, or two, to just open their mind. Because for me, I'm based in Ireland, studying in France, but between that, I have traveled to many different countries in Europe, and one thing I've learned is like we're all the same. Like, if that makes sense, we're all the same but different at the same time. Like, we all are wanting, craving, people, communication, interaction, but we're different in the fact that the way we grew up, what we grew up watching, what we grew up speaking, and that's something we can share and learn from each other. And it's beautiful because you'll see these catchphrases people say in different languages when they translate to English, and you're like, wow, I never thought like that. So keep an open mind, don't be closed-minded, open to trying new things, open to going to new places. And you never know, you could land your dream job, your dream man, your dream career, your dream house. Like, it's really on the other side of the unknown, but you just have to go and get it. But yeah, that's my advice.
Cheers to that. And I think that's a perfect note to leave us off on, because you definitely have been a dream guest and dream collaboration.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely one that I was not expecting, honestly, but I'm so appreciative and grateful for that I'm able to not only connect with you on like a podcast interviewee level, but also to share that common interest of being an intern who's running a podcast, but who's also juggling all these different things and all these unique opportunities. And so I appreciate you just leaving us on that big note of just sharing and nourishing from others. I love the essence of community in that way and how much it can bring you, and then just going out there, because you never know what it can do for you. And again, I just want to thank you so much for taking your time, especially in a different time zone, to come meet with me.
Girl, my pleasure. Honestly, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Cause like I honestly was like, I seen your message, cause I follow this girl on TikTok, actually, a little backstory. And her name's Caitlin, I believe. Either Caitlin or Caitlin. And I seen that you messaged under and you're looking for her to mentor you. And I was like, me too. Where are you from? And then I did my little LinkedIn stuff, and I was like, America, and she's a podcaster as well. I had to message you, and I had to get you on your podcast, and you also on my podcast. So it's just amazing that honestly it's the first for me as well. International waters, like this is only the beginning. And I've honestly really enjoyed this podcast. Yeah, like it's honestly been amazing, and being able to speak, share advice, and hopefully inspire intern, international, American, Irish, whatever you are tuning in from, to really just chase your dreams and know that you can do it. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Intentional Intern podcast. As always, let me know what or who you guys want to hear from next, and I'll see you guys next time, sharing another student with an amazing story.